Now, the government has announced proposals to fight leasehold abuse, which can often see homeowners hit by escalating ground rents and developers reaping high profits.
But campaigners say these measures don't go far enough and do nothing to help those in already spiralling contracts. Well, our next guest is PR consultant Andrew Teacher, a property expert also. Welcome to you. First of all, explain to us the benefits of leasehold. Are there any if it's run properly?
Well, there's about 4 million leaseholds in the UK. Now, typically they're flats. If you buy a flat, you won't own the freehold to it. You'll own a leasehold, which is essentially a temporary ownership of it. And you'll pay two things. You'll pay a ground rent, possibly, which is normally a small amount paid each year, and you'll pay a service charge, which covers the running costs of the building. So if you're renting, if you own an apartment, what you don't want to be is responsible for everyone else's stuff, all of the shared areas. If the roof leaks, if there's a sewage problem, those are things that would be covered by the service charge and would be managed by what's called a managing agent, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's an agent that manages the property as a whole, and that offers you as a leaseholder some legal protection, because if you buy an apartment and the roof leaks and it's not fixed, you then have a legal right to get it fixed by the freeholder. Now, the problem that's been highlighted through this campaign over the last few years has been where leaseholds have been sold with new houses rather than flats, and as part of that, the actual ground rent element, which is normally a small amount, has been doubling, often within short periods of time, such as 10 years, which leaves people really exposed, because if you've got a ground rent that doubles every 10 years, the property quickly becomes unsellable, which is the main complaint that campaigners have. It's a bit of a complex situation, but it's not quite as simple as blaming any single party, because a developer over the years have been hit by quite a number of extra levies by local councils due to central government cutting budgets, and they've sought to recoup a bit more cash by selling off these ground rents essentially as income streams to bring in a bit more cash to make sites more viable, and with that have lost control of them, and that's allowed the people that they've sold these ground rents to shove up the costs, which is what's hit a lot of consumers. But
selling a house as leasehold is it's a bit of a con first time round.
Oh, it's a bit of a naughty.
Because if you buy a house and then they say, actually, on top of your £200,000, £300,000, do you want to buy the freehold as well? And that's going to cost you another 5 or 6 grand on top. It just seems a bit naughty.
It is a bit naughty, but I think what other people possibly watching this morning might think is, well, look, no one put a gun to the head of these people that bought these properties, and in fairness, they didn't. And I think,
but it's a way onto the property ladder, isn't it? It's sold as ownership, but in effect, they're tenants.
And that's the key point. It's how it's sold, how it's marketed. So I think one big question that hasn't been raised is, what does the Law Commission do about this? Because actually, when you buy a property, and the people that would have bought these houses, you say, Steve, from house builders, they'd have been they walk into the showroom, the house builder will say, right, speak to our lawyers, they'll do all the conveyancing for you, and we'll do it for free because we're really nice guys. And is the advice they get off of those lawyers, is that going to be independent? Of course it's not. Yeah. And I think there's a question there for the Law Commission over the independent advice provided to people, because ultimately most lawyers with half a brain cell will be able to read through one of these contracts and go, hang on, look, that's a little bit dodgy, doubling every 10 years. So I think there is a big question there for the Law Commission. There's also a question for the government, because many of these homes that you're talking about, Steve, those have been sold under the government's Help to Buy scheme, as you correctly say, as a route onto the ladder. So that's where I think the government has got a case to answer here, where its own scheme, which is basically giving out cheap equity to people, cheap loans so that people can get onto the housing ladder, those schemes have essentially what have got a lot of people into the mess they now find themselves.
OK, Andrew, there we must leave it. It's not a happy tale, is it? If you're affected by that, would love to hear from you today at Sky Stephen, at Sky Gillian on Twitter.
In the meantime, still to come.